This is the first in a series of 5 videos on William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying. Not included in this group is an older pandemic era video in which I give a little background about the novel and talk about its complicated structure and Faulkner's writing style, which can be difficult for first time readers. I briefly mentioned the fictional world of Yoknapatawpha County, in which Faulkner would set many of his later novels, and introduce the major characters in the book. So basically, it's an orientation video, and it may be helpful to check it out before starting this series. I want to emphasize that these videos are not an attempt to explicate the novel chapter by chapter. They're intended rather to supplement the work my students do as part of their daily preparation. So there are many crucial passages I will not mention in these videos, leaving them instead for students to investigate on their own and bring up in class discussion. What I will do is focus on passages that sometimes get overlooked by first-time readers or that present certain interpretive challenges, but passages that I think are significant and helpful to our understanding of the novel. Each video will begin with a summary of the assigned reading, typically around 50-60 pages, followed by my reading of and commentary on some chosen passages. In the first 64 pages, we get 14 chapters or monologues. Remember, each chapter is written in the voice of a different character. 10 monologues come from various members of the Bundren family, and the other 4 belong to outsiders. 2 from Cora, 1 from her husband, Vernon Toll, and 1 from Dr. Peabody. Of the Bundrens, Darrell gets 5 chapters, and by the end of the novel, he will have more than any other character. Significantly, Jules' one monologue is the only time we hear directly from him in the entire book. What we learn about him comes mostly through the perceptions of others. Dewey Dell, the only daughter among the Bundren children, gets 2 chapters. Vardaman, the youngest of them, gets 1, and Ance, their father, gets 1. So from these 14 chapters, I have selected 4 to receive special attention in this video. So we'll start with Darrell, pages 16 to 20. This is already his 3rd monologue, and we're not even 20 pages into the novel yet. In a minute, we're going to look at a short but memorable passage, the very last paragraph of his monologue, that gives us some insight into what makes him different from the rest of his family, which is his highly developed sensory awareness, his capacity to penetrate and understand things no one else does. But before we look at this passage, I'm going to read from the 2 monologues that follow immediately after it, both recounting the same scene at Addie's sickbed. First from the perspective of Cora Toll, followed by Dewey Dell. We're reading these first because what we see in their observations and interactions with Darrell gives us some additional insight into how his mind works and why he remains a mystery to most of the characters in the book. It was Darrell. He come to the door and stood there, looking at his dying mother. He just looked at her, and I felt the bounteous love of the Lord again, and his mercy. I saw that with Jules she had just been pretending, but that it was between her and Darrell that the understanding and the true love was. He just looked at her, not even coming in where she could see him and get upset, knowing that Ance was driving him away and he would never see her again. He said nothing, just looking at her. "What you want, Darrell?" Dewey Dell said, not stopping the fan, speaking up quick, keeping even him from her. He didn't answer. He just stood and looked at his dying mother, his heart too full for words. Cora is flat wrong about many things, and this won't be the last time either. But nowhere is she more wrong than in her assessment of Addie's moral character and her relationship with her sons, Darrell and Jewel, and we'll see that later in the novel. Here she misreads Darrell's reason for leaving with Jewel and also misreads his feelings towards his sick mother, as we learn in the next monologue describing the same scene, this time from the perspective of Dewey Dell. He stands in the door, looking at her. "What do you want, Darl?" I say. "She's going to die," he says. "And old Turkey Buzzard Tull coming to watch her die, but I can fool them." "When is she going to die?" I say. "Before we get back," he says. "Then why are you taking Jewel?" I say. "I want him to help me load," he says. So we'll look back now at Darl's monologue, specifically the last paragraph, pages 19 and 20 in the novel. And here is that passage. "I enter the hall, hearing the voices before I reach the door. Tilting a little down the hill as our house does, a breeze draws through the hall all the time, up slanting. A feather dropped near the front door will rise and brush along the ceiling, slanting backward, until it reaches the down-turning current at the back door. So with voices. As you enter the hall, they sound as though they were speaking out of the air about your head." So Darl observes things, small, seemingly insignificant things that other characters overlook. He's able to pursue and draw connections between points that other characters can't follow, can't connect, whether it's because they're less attentive than he is, less sensitive, or perhaps less poetical. Darl reminds me of Edgar Allan Poe's detective, C'est Auguste Dupin, who argues and eventually demonstrates that the poetical mind is more capable of solving seemingly insoluble mysteries than the rational mind. So Darl can hear words spoken outside his presence, sometimes coming from other rooms, sometimes coming from miles away. And he's able to communicate his own thoughts to his siblings, seemingly without uttering a word. These communicative ambiguities raise questions about later exchanges in which Darl is the primary interlocutor. Conversations with Jewel, for example, and especially those he has with young Vardaman later in the novel. So we'll move on now to the next monologue. This is Vernon Tull, pages 29 to 34. This is an exchange between Ance and Vardaman, as witnessed by Vernon. Your first time reading this scene, it might seem innocuous, perhaps even comical, but it demands special attention because of the way Vardaman later grieves over the loss of his mother and has to deal with the constant presence of her decomposing body. "You clean that fish," Ance says. "Aw, Pa," Vardaman says. "You clean it," Ance says. He don't look around. Vardaman comes back and picks up the fish. It slides out of his hands, smearing wet dirt onto him, and flops down, dirtying itself again, gap-mouthed, goggle-eyed, hiding into the dust like it was ashamed of being dead, like it was in a hurry to get back hid again. Vardaman cusses it. He cusses it like a grown man, standing astraddle of it. Ance don't look around. Vardaman picks it up again. He goes on around the house, toting it in both arms like an armful of wood, it overlapping him on both ends, head and tail, darn nigh big as he is. What stands out here is how quickly Vardaman transitions from being proud of the fish he's just caught and wanting to show it off to feelings of disgust and anger. It's no longer a trophy, no longer an accomplishment, one of the rites of passage leading Vardaman into manhood, but rather a mess that must be dealt with, just like his mother's body must be dealt with. In Vardaman's mind, there develops a troubling parallel between his disposing of the fish and the family's obligation to Addie's corpse. Tull's description of the fish here as ashamed of being dead, like it was in a hurry to get back hid again, that will resurface later in the novel in an important conversation between Darl and Vardaman. So we'll move on now to talk about Ance and a really interesting, just fascinating monologue he has about the road. "Darn that road. And it fixin' to rain, too. I can stand here and same as see it with second sight, a shutting down behind them like a wall, shutting down betwixt them and my given promise. I do the best I can, much as I can get my mind on anything, but darn them boys. a-layin' there right up to my door, where every bad luck that comes and goes is bound to find it. I told Addie it wasn't any luck living on a road when it come by here, and she said, for the world like a woman, get up and move then. But I told her there wasn't no luck in it, because the Lord put roads for traveling. Why, he laid them down flat on the earth. When he aims for something to be always a-moving, he makes it long ways, like a road, or a horse, or a wagon. But when he aims for something to stay put, he makes it up and down ways, like a tree, or a man. And so he never aimed for folks to live on a road, because which gets there first, I says, the road or the house? Did you ever know him to set a road down by a house, I says? No, you never, I says, because it's always men can't rest till they gets the house set where everybody that passes in a wagon can spit in the doorway, keeping the folks restless and wanting to get up and go somewhere else when he aimed for them to stay put, like a tree or a stand of corn. Because if he'd aimed for man to be always a-moving and going somewhere else, wouldn't he have put him long ways on his belly, like a snake? Stands to reason he would. Putting it where every bad luck prowling can find it and come straight to my door, charging me taxes on top of it, making me pay for cash, having to get them carpenter notions when if it hadn't been no road come there, he wouldn't have got them, falling off of churches and lifting no hand in 6 months, and me and Addie slaving and a-slaving when there's plenty of sawing on this place he could do if he's got to saw. And Darrell, too, talking me out of him, darn them. It ain't that I'm afraid of work. I always is fed me and mine and kept a roof above us. Is that they would shorthand me just because he tends to his own business, just because he's got his eyes full of the land all the time. I says to them, he was all right at first, with his eyes full of the land, because the land laid up and down ways then. It wasn't till that ere road come and switched the land around long ways, and his eyes still full of the land, that they begun to threaten me out of him, trying to shorthand me with the law. Clearly, then, Ance is troubled by the proximity of the road to his property. For him, the road symbolizes progress and change, and not in a good way. He resents the road. It causes him to feel left behind. Twice in these paragraphs, he compares man to a tree, stationary, rooted to the earth. But trees are cut into lumber that Darrell and Jewel deliver to raise the money the family will need for their journey to Jefferson with Addie's body, and lumber for the coffin they will carry her in. The road also represents the family's connection to the larger world. It is not just an exit for his sons, but also an entrance for outsiders like tax collectors and lawmen and state officials. Perhaps the most striking passage here is what he says about Darrell, that people on the outside, not just the Bundren's nosy neighbors, but other people, outsiders, have information about Darrell. Information, Ance implies, having to do with his mental condition, information that would allow someone, or perhaps some agency, to remove Darrell from the farm. Without disclosing too much here, it's important, I just want to emphasize it's important for readers to file this revelation away until we approach the end of the novel. Finally, then, we get to Dewey Dell's monologue. Hers begins with the stress that she feels about her unexpected pregnancy, which she's managed to keep secret from everyone except Darrell, and her desire to communicate her situation to Dr. Peabody, whom she apparently believes could help her terminate the pregnancy. He could do so much for me if he just would. He could do everything for me. It's like everything in the world for me is inside a tub full of guts, so that you wonder how there could be any room in it for anything else very important. He is a big tub of guts, and I'm a little tub of guts, and if there's not any room for anything else important in a big tub of guts, how can it be room in a little tub of guts? But I know it is there, because God gave women a sign when something has happened bad. It's because I am alone. If I could just feel it, it would be different, because I would not be alone. But if I were not alone, everybody would know it, and he could do so much for me, and then I would not be alone. Then I could be all right alone. I would let him come in between me and Leif, like Darrell come in between me and Leif, and so Leif is alone too. He is Leif, and I am Dewey Dell. And when mother died, I had to go beyond and outside of me and Leif and Darl to grieve because he could do so much for me and he don't know it. He don't even know it. What I find most striking here is the dilemma of her feeling alone with the immense burden of her secret, her pregnancy, and yet knowing that in the biological sense, she's not alone because of the child she now carries inside her. On the one hand, then, she seeks to end a pregnancy that is redefining her sense of self, to return to being just Dewey Dell and not also the mother of Leif's child. On the other hand, she can't end the pregnancy on her own. She doesn't know how, and enlisting help from others will, of course, permanently change how they see her. So, this is the source of much of her resentment and hostility towards Darl throughout the novel. Simply put, she can no longer go back to being the girl she once was, which also complicates the way she grieves the loss of her mother. Dewey Dell loses her mother while in the process of becoming a mother herself. Interestingly, these passages will echo throughout Addie's important monologue on marriage and motherhood midway through the book, and we'll be looking at that chapter in the fourth video of this series. With that, we end the first video on William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying.